This is the Cash Value Solutions Podcast, where your hosts, Jason Pohlmeyer and Kyle Mann, shed light on little-known money truths to help you take control of your financial future and become your own banker. Subscribe, rate, and review the show, and check us out at cashvaluesolutions.com.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning back into the podcast. I'm Jason and I'm here with my partner Kyle. What are we going to be talking about today?
Well, today we're going to be talking about the human laws that Nelson discusses in his book. And the first one that he talks about is Parkinson's law.
Okay, so how would you describe Parkinson's law? What does that mean? What does it mean to you?
Well, Parkinson's law, I guess the main idea is that your work expands to meet the time envelope that's allowed. And we can relate that to many different things.
So if I have a job to do today and it only takes 30 minutes to do, but I have a week to get it done, I'll get it done at the end of the week, you're saying?
Yes, with maybe a minute to spare.
Okay. Nelson also talks about, we'll just get these all out here in the beginning and then we'll kind of go over what this means to us. So a luxury once enjoyed becomes necessity, and expenses rise to equal income. I think when everybody reads this part of the book, they can think of some aspect of their life where this has come true for them, and it represents opportunity, I think, to maybe improve your financial situation and find a way to start an IBC policy.
But you got to have those leather-cooled seats.
But so that's just one instance, you know, and we think of air conditioning in cars as necessity now, and I truly do consider it a necessity. When it's 90 or 100 degrees out, I don't want to be driving around in my car without that. But to me, if I really dive in and look at all of these laws, it all comes down to discipline in my life. What about you, Kyle?
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with like wanting the luxurious stuff. It's just keeping it in check. Like what makes sense to buy? And am I looking at an asset or a liability? If we focus on buying assets over the long term, I mean, we can then afford some of the nicer, luxurious stuff that we want.
Now, remind me again, Robert Kiyosaki likes to talk about how if you're a saver, you're a loser, you know, and we're talking about discipline right now. So How is this different than that? Or how are we overcoming something that somebody else has an opposing view about, and he's well thought of in the finance community?
Well, he's also focusing on buying assets, not liabilities. He's talks about expanding your means and focusing on cash flow. So if you want the car, he's like, go out and buy an asset that pays for that car. So go buy a rental property that makes the monthly payment on the car.
Okay, so there's no problem in getting these nicer things. We just need to do it a different way than trading our time for labor.
Yeah.
Okay. And I completely agree with how that is. I know that can be misconstrued, you know, when we're saying one thing, but, you know, when we think of our money being spent on liabilities, that your income and expenses should not be equal to each other. Yeah. There should be a pretty good gap between those. I also think that it's important. If you guys truly want to become financially independent, you have to find a way to buy assets before you purchase liabilities. And then you're practicing discipline, right? Because you had to purchase the asset first before you could get the liability, which is in all probability what you actually wanted.
Yeah, and it goes against today's instant gratification. You know, what we see every day. It's the delayed gratification that we need to focus on.
Right. Delayed gratification. And Nelson says, I'm going to go back to what he said in his book, that if you can't overcome this law, you will be a slave to the system. And again, Nelson is referring to if you go out, you purchase liabilities, and your income and expenses are equal to each other, you're going to be working until the day that you die, you know? And I mean working because you have to work, not because you want to work too. There's a distinction there as well.
Yeah, and if you want the nice car, you want the nice house, you know, everything's financed through the bank. We're making monthly payments on everything, and you lose your job, I mean, that's going to cause some stress.
Absolutely. Unless you have an IBC policy where you are in control of the banking function.
Yes.
Okay. I think we've covered this law fairly well. But Nelson also says in here, everything you do in the financial world is compared to what everyone else does. And if you can beat Parkinson's law, you'll win by default because nobody else can. Mm-hmm. And we see that. I hear it in conversations with people when I'm out socializing in the evenings. It's just what modern culture is. We go out, we purchase the big TVs, the nice cars, the nice houses, and we prioritize those things over assets in our lives. And because of that, we're in the rat races, as Robert Kiyosaki said.
Yeah, and Nelson also goes on to say, Parkinson's law, it must be overcome daily. You are fighting it every day.
Yeah, when do you go to the store and be like, I don't want anything here?
Yeah, yep.
Whether that's the car dealership, wherever you go, there's always something out there that you want. And I'll also make the remark, Nelson said that he would argue expenses don't just rise to equal income, expenses rise to exceed income.
Yeah.
That is a tremendous problem if you're purchasing liabilities.
Yes.
Money has to come from somewhere at some point in time to put that to cover that debt. Thank you.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a painful financial living for you if that's current practice right now.
Absolutely. So, do you want to move on to the next law, which is Willie Sutton's law?
Yeah. So Nelson's very clear in stating this. Wherever wealth is accumulated, someone will try to steal it. And why did Willie Sutton was a famous bank robber, we should say. But what was Willie Sutton's famous line that he would tell everybody of why he keeps robbing banks?
Yeah, so people would ask him, why do you rob the banks? And he would just simply say, because that's where they keep the money.
And it's true, isn't it?
It is.
It was the first labor-saving device and it wasn't even created. It was just here, and somebody used it.
Yeah, before technology made stuff easy, you could just go steal.
Yep. And I want to read an excerpt out of Nelson's book now about Nelson. Let me back up a little bit. Nelson says that the IRS is the biggest thief in the world. And I want to give you his analogy of how he brings this across to people. And he says, let's go to a shopping mall or some such place where there are lots of people to witness what I am about to do to you. At this point, I pull out a gun and place it against your head and direct you to give me the contents of your wallet, or I will blow your brains out. I can predict with certainty that those who saw this act will describe it as theft and call for my punishment. But if you will allow me to gather the same crowd for about an hour before you show up and let me talk to them about how we are going to divide the contents of your wallet and distribute among them, now they will call the act democracy in action. If you guys couldn't tell, Nelson did not believe in government in the way that we have government in the nation today.
Yeah, and Nelson goes on further to explain with a quote from Frederick Bastiat, but how is this legal plunder to be identified? Quite simply, see if the law takes from some persons that belong to them and gives it to other persons to whom it does not belong. See if the law benefits one citizen at the expense of another by doing what the citizen himself cannot do without committing a crime.
Yeah, what would happen if I took your money and distributed it out throughout our friends, Kyle?
I'd be very unhappy about that.
But in all reality, I'll probably go to jail if you want to press charges on me, right?
I would hope so, yes.
Yeah. He's trying to make it vividly clear that if you and I, the American citizen, would try to do what the government's doing now, we would go to jail.
Yeah, Nelson brings it up because most people probably don't even think of it that way.
Yeah, and then Nelson even goes on to further illustrate this, talking about qualified plans and how the fox is guarding the hen house. Do you want to explain that to us, Kyle?
Yeah, so the reason why he uses this is because in the first place, the government created the problem with their onerous taxation. And so then they offer this vehicle, this qualified plan that is supposed to lessen the tax consequences that you have. So if the person that created the problem in the beginning is then offering the so-called solution, wouldn't you be just a little bit afraid that you're being manipulated?
I definitely would now that you say it that way. I mean, Nelson is just trying to point out things that everybody, I would say they aren't even exposed to, you know? You just hear on the radio all the time, maximize your qualified plan, put as much money into that as you can. But then look at the amount of restrictions that there is to use that money. It's like it's not even yours anymore.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think you were saying this not too long ago, how people get your paycheck and, you know, look how much has gone from taxation. And then what do they do with the rest? Well, they pay their expenses, and what little bit they have left, they send that to a qualified plan. So look at how much money the government's getting control of.
Yeah, and the qualified plan comes first before the expenses, though, even.
So, yeah, sometimes, yeah.
It's crazy to think that, you know, 50% of our paycheck even may be going to some government type of qualified plan or tax right off the top. That is unreal.
And it's also something that we don't even control. I mean, we have no control over. There's restrictions, penalties, and still some tax consequences.
Think of this. There only between ages, at least right now, this is what the law is today, between ages 59 and a half and 72 is when you can take money out of your account without any penalty. Now, if you want to keep it in there longer than that, there's penalties. And if you want to withdraw it earlier than that, there's penalties. That is subject to minor exceptions to the rule, but that is the overwhelming way that works with qualified plans.
And talk about arbitrary numbers. I mean, 59 and a half, 72, where do they come up with this stuff?
That's a great question. And, you know, maybe instead of dwelling on all this negativity, let's move on to the solution to this problem.
Well, Nelson says the real solution is to quit all the spending for the government programs and just have the government get out of people's lives and let them take control of their financial future.
Yes, and then what would happen is free people would contract with other free people, and government would just be limited to the function of enforcing the contracts between those people. That's the only function that they would need to perform.
Yeah, and Nelson says, you know, we can do this through dividend-paying whole life insurance.
It's tried and true, and it existed before the tax code was ever here. And he also makes it clear, I'm not sure at what point in the book, that the government had surpluses in the budget before the income tax code was around. We didn't need the income tax code, as we think we do today, to provide for the government essentials that we have come to believe at least are essentials.
Yeah, and he goes on to say, obviously that dividend-paying whole life insurance is a solution. He says, you know, it's not a government-sponsored idea. It came before the income tax, and it's private property. And it's also a group of people who are doing it because they care about others who are dear to them. Isn't that the type of people you'd want to be associated with?
Yeah, Nelson made a great point in wrapping up that section, or this human law. So anything else that you would like to add with these two laws before we get off, Kyle?
And I think we got them both covered.
Okay. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Appreciate it, and we'll catch you next time.
This was the Cash Value Solutions Podcast. Remember to subscribe, rate, and review the show. Check us out at cashvaluesolutions.com. And don't forget to tune in next week.